In a world obsessed with titles, uniforms, and rank insignias, true expertise often walks in quietly, unannounced, unnoticed, and unappreciated. Anna Carlyle was the embodiment of that truth. She didn't wear stripes on her sleeves or medals on her chest. She didn't have a list of deployments to her name or a commanding voice that filled rooms. She worked in the shadows of Fort Bragg's armory, cleaning, repairing, and perfecting rifles that others trusted with their lives. Most soldiers passed her without a glance, seeing only a civilian contractor with a name patch. But Anna's silence wasn't emptiness. It was precision. Every turn of her wrench, every adjustment to a firing pin, every flicker of her steady hands whispered authority louder than any shouted order could. When rank falls quiet, skill begins to speak, and Anna's skill spoke fluently. The soldiers who strutted into the armory carried the confidence of war, hardened men. They had seen combat, earned scars, and lived under the illusion that experience alone defined mastery. But Anna operated on a different wavelength. She didn't measure her worth by badges or salutes. She measured it in balance, torque, and timing. Her world was microscopic. Carbon build up in a bolt carrier, the subtle misalignment of a scope, the way a trigger break could feel half a millimeter too rough. In that smallness, she found greatness. Her authority wasn't declared, it was demonstrated. When others spoke loudly about their achievements, Anna proved hers quietly, one flawless rifle at a time. True expertise doesn't seek recognition, it commands it through consistency, precision, and results that cannot be argued. When Staff Sergeant Rigg walked into her bay with that worn Barrett M107A1 and arrogance on his shoulders, he didn't see a peer. He saw a civilian, someone beneath his world of warfare and hierarchy. But hierarchy collapses the moment ignorance meets excellence. Anna didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. The way she stripped down the rifle in seconds, smooth, deliberate, surgical, was its own kind of conversation. Rigg realized, too late, that he was standing before someone who didn't need rank to command respect. That's what real mastery looks like. Quiet control over chaos. It doesn't posture, doesn't seek applause, it simply performs. When Anna accepted his challenge to shoot at 300 meters, it wasn't pride that made her say yes. It was understanding. She knew skill doesn't belong to those who boast, it belongs to those who build. When the shot rang out the next day and echoed across the range, it wasn't just a bullet piercing a target. It was a message. Expertise doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself when it's tested. In that single, impossible hit, every unspoken truth about Anna became undeniable. The soldiers who once overlooked her now stood silent, not because they were told to respect her, but because they had to. The sound of that steel ping carried more authority than any rank insignia ever could. Anna didn't need to prove herself to them. They needed to recalibrate their definition of power. In that moment, they understood the expertise isn't about hierarchy. It's about ownership of one's craft, and those who master their craft, even in silence, lead without asking permission. In the end, Anna Carlyle's legacy was not built through rank, command, or medals. It was built through competence so undeniable that it transcended titles. The uniformed elite learned that day that respect doesn't flow upward through chains of command. It radiates outward from the truly skilled. Expertise, when pure, carries a dignity that outlives recognition. It doesn't shout to be seen, it simply stands, unshaken, until the world finally turns quiet enough to listen. When rank falls away and words lose meaning, what remains are the steady hands, the practiced mind, and the silent authority of those who know. And in that silence, expertise speaks louder than any voice on the field. Talk is easy in a world built on stories, rumors, and the illusion of ability. Every soldier at Fort Bragg had one. A tale about a perfect shot, a flawless mission, or a near miss that became legend. But legends fade fast under pressure. Anna Carlyle understood that. She had no stories to tell, no tales to polish, no audience to impress. Her proof was built from action, not explanation. When Staff Sergeant Rigg dropped that Barrett M107A1 on her table and tested her with a smirk, Anna didn't argue. She didn't promise anything or defend her experience. She simply worked, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, with the precision of someone who didn't need validation. For her, proof wasn't something you claimed. It was something you delivered when the world stopped doubting long enough to watch. When Rigg invited her to the range, the air shifted. The challenge wasn't about distance or accuracy. It was about credibility. He wanted to see if the quiet civilian could match the myth of the uniform. What he didn't realize was that Anna had already spent years proving herself. Not to others, but to herself. Every weapon she repaired, every barrel she calibrated, was a test of patience and precision. She didn't need a target to validate her skill. The process was her proof. Yet when the moment came, she accepted the dare not out of pride, but principle. Some moments arrive where silence must speak, and in Anna's world, the only language that mattered was results. Proof doesn't argue. It doesn't defend. It fires hits and lets the echo do the talking. That morning at the 300-meter range, the silence was deafening. The distance was impossible. A stretch of air so vast even seasoned marksmen flinched at the thought of attempting it. But Anna didn't see the challenge. She saw the math. She saw the crosswind like a living thing, felt the temperature's subtle shift, calculated the spin drift and the Coriolis effect with instinct born of study and stillness. When she fired, it wasn't luck, it was alignment between preparation, patience, and purpose. The round sliced through the air, carrying with it years of unseen discipline. Then came that faint, distant ping, the steel's surrender, the echo of proof. The men around her fell silent, their skepticism dissolving into awe. No speech could have explained it better. She didn't look for applause, because the sound of the hit was enough. But proof is never enough for those who live in disbelief. 2 days later, when that note arrived, if it wasn't luck, prove it again. Anna didn't hesitate. She went to the off-grid range not to silence her critics, but to confirm her own truth. And when she made that shot a second time, clean, precise, and perfect, the conversation was over. Not because she sought victory, but because she understood something few ever do. The louder someone boasts, the less they've done, the quieter someone becomes, the more they've achieved. Proof doesn't need an audience, and mastery doesn't need permission. The real ones never beg to be believed. They just perform until belief becomes irrelevant. In the end, Anna didn't carry her proof in medals or certificates. She carried it in the steel she struck, the records she broke, and the silence she left behind. The soldiers at Fort Bragg still talk about her, still wonder how she did it. But Anna knows the truth. Proof is not about winning arguments. It's about ending them. It doesn't require validation, applause, or acknowledgement. It simply requires consistency, the courage to act when others hesitate, and the patience to let results speak louder than ego. Because when all the noise fades and the world demands evidence, words fail. But proof, the kind you earn through sweat, skill, and silence, hits its mark every single time. Legacies are not built in applause. They are born in silence, in the hours no one sees, in the discipline no one claps for, in the small, deliberate actions that echo long after the noise fades. Anna Carlyle never set out to build one. She didn't want headlines, recognition, or the glow of a medal ceremony. Her world was small. A workbench, a set of tools, and the steady rhythm of precision. Each rifle she repaired was treated like a living thing, a story made of metal and memory. When others saw hardware, she saw history. When others clocked out, she stayed behind, polishing the steel that once carried someone else's survival. In that repetition, in the quiet hum of her work, her legacy began, not with grand gestures, but with the kind of devotion that outlives its owner. When she pulled the impossible shot, twice, and walked away from glory, Anna proved something the world had long forgotten. Greatness doesn't have to announce itself. It endures because it is real. The soldiers at Fort Bragg expected her to chase the aftermath, interviews, recognition, maybe even recruitment. Instead, she went back to her bench, to the same quiet space where it all began. That act, walking away when the world finally looked, was what made her different. Because legacy is not what you take from a moment of fame. It's what you leave behind when fame comes and you refuse to kneel to it. In an age addicted to noise, her silence was her rebellion. And in that stillness, she taught every person watching that legacy is built not on what you say, but on what you consistently do, even when no one is watching. The soldiers whispered her name long after she'd gone. The ghost. They called her. The civilian who outshot the world's best and disappeared before the applause began. But that name didn't belong to a myth. It belonged to a reminder. She didn't stay to collect proof of what she'd done, because proof wasn't her goal. Impact was. The flag she refused, the certificate she declined, the offers she turned down. Each of those choices was a statement louder than victory. She wasn't building a monument, she was clearing a path. Her quiet hands didn't carve her own pedestal, they built the foundation for others to rise. Every young recruit who picked up a rifle after hearing her story wasn't chasing fame. They were chasing excellence. That's the kind of legacy that never dies. The one that teaches, not the one that boasts. What makes a legacy powerful isn't perfection, it's purpose. Anna's purpose wasn't to dominate, but to demonstrate. She showed that humility and mastery can coexist, that you don't need permission to belong in a room of giants if your work speaks louder than their pride. Every moment she spent in silence became a lesson in patience. Every rifle she touched became a message about respect. Even Rig, the hardened soldier who once doubted her, learned what leadership truly meant. Not commanding from above, but recognizing greatness beside you, even when it wears no stripes. Legacy isn't the echo of power, it's the shadow of influence. And Anna's influence spread through whispers, not speeches. It lived in the way people began to think differently about what skill, respect, and excellence really meant. When the world finally tried to find her, she was already gone, back to her bench, back to the rifles, back to the silence. That's how real legacies live, not in museums or headlines, but in motion, in the hearts and hands of those they inspire. Months later, when a young girl stepped up to a range and fired a perfect shot on her first try, it wasn't luck. It was the ripple of Anna's quiet defiance moving through time. Legacy doesn't demand to be remembered. It teaches others to remember why they started. Anna's life was proof that brilliance doesn't need permission, excellence doesn't need rank, and history doesn't need noise to be made. Because the truest legacies, the ones that outlast names, ranks, and medals, are always forged in quiet hands.